As we've been doing throughout the time of Lent, we are sharing both a contemporary word of wisdom and also ancient word of wisdom in our scripture. And our contemporary word this morning comes from Christian singer-songwriter Morgan Harper Nichols, who has this to say about stories. Tell the story of the mountain you've climbed. Your words could become a page in someone else's survival guide. And now for our more ancient sharing, this from the Gospel of Matthew, the 9th chapter, starting in verse 27. Listen for the Spirit's word to you and to the church in these words of Scripture. As Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying loudly, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he entered the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" And they said to him, "Yes, Lord." Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their eyes were opened. Then Jesus sternly ordered them, "See that no one knows of this." But they went away and spread the news about him throughout the whole district. After they had gone away, the demoniac who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the one who had been mute spoke. And the crowds were amazed and said, "Never has anything like this been seen in Israel." Holy wisdom, holy word. Thanks be to God. So I'm really excited to tell you that one of my closest friends welcomed a new baby into the world this week. Tucker Jesse was born on Monday night to joyful parents and returned home Wednesday to his 2 adorable big brothers, 5 and 10, who I am told welcomed him with great attention and enthusiasm. And I am so filled with joy. And I'm so relieved that in this especially sensitive time, that Tuck's gestation and eventual arrival was safe and happy in the end, and that he is now part of this amazing world and my friend's wonderful family. Now, it's also a little bittersweet, because I have no idea how long it will be until I'm able to meet this new addition to our circle of friends. And I feel sad that I won't be able to do the one thing that I most want to do, which is to just go and spend time, lots of time with him and with his mom. Holding him so that she can rest or take a shower or walk or cry or whatever she needs to do, playing with his brothers so that they don't forget that they're special too, even though they're not new. Looking into his eyes and wondering about who he will be. What parts of my friend and her partner will live on in him, and what parts will be completely surprising and new. This is something that my friend did for me, visiting for a week at the birth of both my children and doing cooking and dishes and baby holding and TV watching and encouraging and laughing and crying and diaper changing. And it was a gift that was so generous and so profound. It touches me even now thinking that she would have done that. And I was so looking forward to this small opportunity to return a bit of the favor to her. Because I know that having a friend by one's side in such a magical and hard and wonderful and tiring and amazing time can really be a lifesaver. Especially a friend who is welcoming of all of your needs and emotions. Now, I feel particularly lucky that this friend and I have known one another for a very long time, which means that we can share all of ourselves with each other. Our worries and our fear and our joy and sometimes guilt and lots of hope can be exchanged without judgment. Like I might call her one day and say, "This is gross, but do your kids do this weird thing?" And she would say, "Oh yeah, totally. They totally do." Or I would say, "Man, I am so angry at such and such a thing." And she would say, "Yeah." Or she would say to me, "I'm jealous of our other friend who blah, 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 blah." And I would say, "Totally, I am too." Or she would say, "I'm feeling so awesome about this thing that I accomplished." And I would say, "That's because you are awesome." She's my friend because I know that if I complain to her on a Tuesday about something Jason did that annoyed me, then she will say, "Boo." But if I call the following Thursday to report that he has been recrowned a prince, she would say, "I've always loved him." After 20 years as friends, we are lucky to know each other's stories and to help the other draw strength from them. And the older I get, the more I realize what a rare gift that is. I have come across only a handful in my lifetime. And so I was thinking a lot about my friend this week, not only because the big news in her family, and I was waiting every minute by the phone for more amazing pictures, but also because of the story that we read from Matthew about the two blind men. Now, I'm going to switch gears here into a little geeky biblical trivia. Can you handle that? Getting everything is smorgasbord in the sermon today. Cute baby thoughts, biblical trivia, geeking out. So there is a small mystery in the Gospel of Matthew that no one can really solve that's called Matthean Doubling. Have we ever heard about this? No? Okay, not even Lauren. This is great. Now, backing up a bit, perhaps you remember, and if you don't, that's okay, because now you're going to know that for quite some time, the prevailing theory has been that the author of Matthew and Luke, when they wrote their Gospels, used as sources both the Gospel of Mark, as we know it, and another document commonly known as Q. No relation to the political conspiracy theory, just to be clear. Now we know this because on many occasions, Matthew and Luke appear to simply cut and paste whole sections of Mark directly into their own gospel, right? This was all happening before intellectual property or plagiarism was really a consideration. But sometimes we can see where they've taken a section from Mark and then made some of their own edits and additions to that story, which is where it gets so interesting, right? Because where we biblical scholars then become like forensic scriptural detectives searching for clues about why they made such changes. Now, sometimes these discrepancies give us a really clear idea about what Matthew and Luke saw as their mission in the way they want to tell their story. Or maybe something about their audience. They're adding something to make something more clear for the people they're talking to, simply by the way they choose to tell the story a bit differently than Mark did. But sometimes we have absolutely no idea why they made certain changes, and one of those examples is what's called Matthean doublings. Now let me describe that now. So in certain stories, which clearly come from Mark, Matthew has taken the liberty of doubling certain people or props within the story. So while Mark tells the story of a Gerasene demoniac who was healed by Jesus, Matthew tells us that when Jesus goes to the land of the Gerasenes, there are two demoniacs that come to him needing healing. Likewise, where Mark and Luke talk about Jesus riding into Jerusalem on what we now call Palm Sunday atop a donkey, Matthew says he is riding a donkey and the colt of a donkey, which doesn't make any sense. How do you ride two donkeys? And actually, I was going to run this joke by Jason before I made it, but I ran out of time this morning. I found out that there is a doctoral thesis of a seminary that shall remain unnamed on the mainland about Matthean doubling, and the title is actually Why Jesus Had Two Asses. I was like, I don't know what academic committee let that thing through, but glad they did. Okay, that's Matthean doubling. The third example in the Gospel of Matthew when this happens is the story that we just heard this morning about two blind men who come to Jesus and seek healing, and they have this interchange in which he says, "Do you believe that I can do this?" And they say yes and receive their healing. It's the exact same story that's in Mark, but in his Gospel it's only one blind man. And I know you're hoping that I'm going to solve the mystery, but I really can't. No one has any idea why Matthew chose to do this or what it meant to him. I mean, there's some ideas, but none of them are really very compelling. But I'm really glad that he did, actually. I've never cared about this little biblical tidbit until this week, and I was like, oh yes, this is wonderful. It opens so many imaginative worlds for me in thinking about this story. Like, so many of the healing stories in the gospel, the person in need of healing is alone, right? The woman who comes to Jesus, the centurion, they're by themselves presenting their need to Jesus. But in this case, it's two people coming together. And I can so clearly see them now, right? These two friends sharing their woes and hopes, kind of trading tales about their blindness and its difficulties, palling around together on the margins of society, maybe swapping scant details that they have picked up about this strange healer that has come from Galilee. And when he's here coming their way, and they know this, I can, in thinking about them together now, feel the care and energy with which they encourage one another and hatch a plan to go see this Jesus guy. Let's go see him, I can hear one saying. Let's go see him and see if he can make us whole. But what will he say? What will we say? I hear the other one saying. I think he's a little bit of a planner. The first one says, I know. Let's say, have mercy on us, son of David. That has some panache, don't you think? Yeah, yes, I think it definitely has panache, says the second. But what if he has some test for us? What if he has some question or riddle in response to that? You can hear the first one saying, then we will simply tell him that we believe and hope that that is enough. Now for me, the fact that these moments are shared just makes them even more beautiful, and I actually think for me it makes them more believable. Because I know that asking for healing is actually really hard, because it involves telling the story of your own brokenness and pain. And I know that we are more likely to make that leap if we have some encouragement, if we have some camaraderie with someone else to push us along the way, right? Encourage, from the French, to put in, cur, heart, to give someone else heart. And isn't that always our mission as a community, a Christian community? You know, we're talking about stories as part of our healing today, and I think the wonderful thing about stories is that they are a double blessing. Matthew would love this. Right? Telling our stories can help heal us. That is well known. When we tell the truth about what's happened to us, about where we've been, when we tell the truth about our worries or our pain, even when we tell the truth about our hope, the things we want to happen, speaking that out loud, even if it's just to one other person, can both liberate and strengthen us. That is true. But I think what we hear here is that stories can also help heal other people. When other people see a reflection of their own joy or pain, their own hopes or worries in us, then they get encouraged too. We give them heart. Which is exactly what the blind guys do in the bit from Matthew, right? Jesus says, okay, you're healed, but don't tell anybody about this, okay? And they say, yeah, right, we're going to tell everybody about this. People need to hear it. And that's what they do. Not only is that a wonderful comment about agency, I think it's also a witness to the power of story that you just can't keep inside you. And actually, there's a special word that we use in the church for the practice of telling other stories to help heal people and draw them closer into the community, and that word is testimony. Right? Some churches even have this discipline when they gather together. Testimony. Tell me what God has been doing in your life recently. Tell me how you've experienced healing, or tell me where you're still waiting for it so I can tell you. Now, some of you are going to get a little bit nervous, like, oh man, is she going to ask people to stand up and give a testimony? And I know that a lot among us are a stay in your pew until the bitter end of the postlude Protestants. And that's okay. I also know a lot of you are pretty long-winded, so we might need to work on that before we just bust open the window of testimony here. But, you know, I think it could be a really powerful practice for us and for our church, especially coming out of this time. Especially because I think it's a witness to the idea that in church, we're invited into a community where our stories need not only be our own. We're invited to share them in their burdens as much as in their joy, and knowing that they will be welcomed with open arms. In the church, we're invited into a community where our stories, in sharing them, we find, are not only avenues to healing for ourselves, and not only avenues of encouragement to other people, but actually powerful avenues through which we come into the presence of God. I think that's the other really important thing, and the other important power of stories. That they give us encouragement to enter in new ways into the presence of God. You know, I think about those two blind men, how going arm in arm, they were able to meet God present in the person of Jesus. And I wonder if they never had each other, if they never would have gone. And I think about how many others that they brought into that same divine light, into that same divine path, through their witness of what had happened to them. So I'm going to give you a little homework assignment here today. We can still do homework in the virtual world, right? So I hear from my friends that are educators. It's two-part homework assignment. The first is to find an opportunity this week to give your testimony. Now, it doesn't have to be anything dramatic. It doesn't have to be like a TV evangelist. It just has to be you finding an opportunity in relationship with someone else that you care for and trust to say what's happening in your heart. If it's appropriate to say, what has God been doing with and for and through you recently? This could be like a 3-sentence thing. Just drop it in there and see if that's an opportunity to connect in a new way with people you care about. Second assignment is part B. Receive somebody else's testimony. Maybe Zoom somebody, call a friend, hear a story that they have to share about their own experience, an own place where they need healing. Seek that out. Tell them that you are a welcome presence. Maybe we start in those tiny, small ways. We don't even have to mention, this is a homework assignment from my church. I'd like to hear about how you need some healing. You can just kind of slip it in there. How you been? How's your heart? Where have you felt you've needed the Spirit recently? I think if we do that, perhaps our swapping of stories begin to give us the encouragement we need to recover from this time of isolation and grief. Maybe it will remind us of one of our primary missions as a Christian community. Because to say that we're a Christian community is to say we've made a commitment to gather around this particular story, the story about Jesus, God with us. And when we gather our stories around that stories too, we start to hear a kind of resonance that will convince us that the holy is being born in our midst all the time. All the time, the holy is being born into our midst. And even in this difficult time of separation, there are so many reasons to celebrate. So I want to offer those invitations to you. I want to say welcome to Baby Tuck. And I want to bless us as we go out from this place, knowing our stories are meant to be shared and knowing that they are welcome here in God's community. So I give all that in the name of God, who created us, who made us and birthed us, but who also redeemed and sustained us. Amen.